Manny Pacquiao was inches away from never stepping inside a real boxing ring, because as a boy in General Santos City, he was selling bread on the streets just to survive. He once said, "I remember as a little boy, I ate one meal a day and sometimes slept in the street." At just 14, he left home on a boat to Manila, chasing a dream that seemed impossible. Years later, even legends like Floyd Mayweather would call him one of the toughest fighters he'd ever faced. And Hall of Fame trainer Freddie Roach once said, "Manny is the most gifted fighter I've ever trained." He also considered Pacquiao to be his own Muhammad Ali, a fighter whose skills, discipline, and drive made Roach a better trainer. Manny was born in 1978 in Cabawe, a small town in the southern Philippines. Life was brutal. His family was poor, so poor that Manny often went to bed hungry. When his father left, the little stability they had was gone. Manny became the man of the house while still just a boy. To help his mother and siblings, he sold bread and water on the streets. He did whatever he could. Imagine that, a child carrying trays of bread, shouting in the market, trying to earn a few pesos just to keep his family alive. And yet, through all that struggle, something inside him burned. That fire was boxing. Manny discovered the sport as a skinny kid who couldn't even afford proper gloves. He wrapped his fists in tape and fought in makeshift rings, taking any bout he could find, often for just a few dollars. Every punch was survival. Every fight was food on the table. He was just a teenager, broke and alone in a massive city. But he believed boxing could change his life, and so he fought. Early on, he lied about his age just to compete. At 16, he turned professional. Think about that. 16 years old, already carrying the weight of his family's survival on his shoulders. His early fights didn't make headlines. He was just another hungry fighter in a country filled with them. But Manny had something different. Relentless speed, unshakable toughness, and a left hand that could end a fight in a heartbeat. In 1998, Manny won his first world title, the WBC Flyweight Championship. It was the first step in what would become one of the most astonishing careers in boxing history. But the journey was far from easy. He suffered brutal defeats. He faced doubters who said he was too reckless, too wild, too small. But every time he was knocked down, he came back stronger. The world started to notice. Trainers saw his potential. Freddie Roach, a legendary coach, took him under his wing. And together, they crafted a fighter who was more than just raw power. They built a disciplined, dynamic machine, a fighter who would terrorize division after division. By the early 2000s, Manny Pacquiao wasn't just a Filipino sensation anymore. He was a global force. He went toe-to-toe with legends like Marco Antonio Barrera, Eric Morales, and Juan Manuel Marquez. These weren't easy fights. These were wars. And every time Manny stepped into the ring, he brought with him not just his fists, but the hopes of an entire nation. In those years, something extraordinary happened. The poor boy who once sold bread was now filling arenas around the world. The kid who couldn't afford food was now feeding millions with his performances. And yet, through it all, he never forgot where he came from. By 2008, Manny Pacquiao was more than just a world champion. He was the pound-for-pound king. It started with Oscar De La Hoya, the Golden Boy.
The pride of East LA, the Golden Boy.
Oscar De La Hoya was the most popular fighter since Muhammad Ali.
The face of boxing for an entire generation. Most people thought Manny was too small, too light, too overmatched. But that night in Las Vegas, size didn't matter. Speed did, heart did, hunger did. And Manny Pacquiao humiliated De La Hoya so badly that Oscar never fought again. That fight was a turning point. The old guard had been dethroned. A new king stood tall. Then came Ricky Hatton. 2 rounds, one thunderous left hand. Hatton flat on the canvas, motionless. That knockout became an instant highlight reel for all time. Miguel Cotto followed, then Margarito. One after another, Manny dismantled the best fighters of his era, and not just beat them, he overwhelmed them. By then, the world wasn't asking, "Who is Manny Pacquiao?" anymore. They were asking, "Is he the greatest of all time?" But every legend has a shadow. For Manny, that shadow was Floyd Mayweather Jr. For years, fans begged for the fight. Pacquiao versus Mayweather. Speed versus defense, ferocity versus perfection. It was the dream matchup. And when it finally happened in 2015, it felt like the entire world stopped. Over 4 million pay-per-view buys, the highest grossing fight in history. 2 icons finally colliding under the brightest lights imaginable. The fight itself, it wasn't the war fans hoped for. Mayweather played his game, defense, counters, and control. Manny tried to break through, but it wasn't enough. Mayweather won by decision. And yet, Even in defeat, Manny's legend didn't fade. Because here's the truth. His story was never just about being undefeated. It was about the journey, about the impossible climb, about how far he had already come. As Manny's boxing career reached its twilight, another chapter opened. Politics. For most fighters, the story ends when they hang up the gloves. For Manny, it was just another beginning. He became a congressman, then a senator in the Philippines. And say what you will about politics, Manny didn't run to get richer. He was already rich. He ran because he remembered the kid he used to be, the boy selling bread on the streets. And he knew there were millions more like him. He funded schools, built hospitals, paid for housing projects. When typhoons hit the Philippines, Manny was there, handing out aid with his own hands. To his people, he wasn't just a boxer. He was a symbol of hope. Even as he aged, Manny refused to quit. Most fighters fade into obscurity. Manny? He was still beating world champions in his 40s. In 2019, he fought Keith Thurman, a young, undefeated star. Everyone thought it was the passing of the torch. But Manny turned back the clock. He dropped Thurman in the first round, outboxed him, and won the WBA welterweight title. At 40 years old, it was surreal. The street vendor from Kibawe was still a world champion decades later. Eventually, time caught up. Manny lost to Yordenis Ugas in 2021. He announced his retirement not long after, turning his full focus to politics. But even in retirement, his presence lingered. Because legends don't really retire. Their stories live forever. Here's the thing about Manny Pacquiao. You can count the titles. You can argue about where he ranks among the all-time greats. But none of that really explains him. How do you explain a boy who sold bread on the streets, becoming an 8-division world champion? How do you explain someone who had nothing, becoming a hero to millions? How do you explain the hunger that never stopped burning, even after he had everything? You can't. Not really. Because Manny Pacquiao's story isn't finished. Not in the ring, not in politics, not in the hearts of the people who see themselves in him. And maybe that's the point. Maybe some stories aren't meant to have an ending. Maybe Manny's story isn't about how it ends. Maybe it's about how it continues. Every time a kid laces up gloves for the first time, dreaming that they too can rise from nothing and fight their way into history.